Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Campfire Stories here at Scary Stories We Tell. I am one of your hosts, Chris Dashew, and I am joined for the first time by, I had never met him before until about 5 minutes ago, but he comes highly suggested by a friend of the show who you have heard many a time here before, Mr. Josh Bragg of the Haunting Season. I am joined by Mike from Charm City Paranormal.
What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Living the dream.
Man, we all say that all the time. Always saying the same thing. Living the dream, man. Just another day in paradise.
Yes, sir.
I was kind of disappointed. There you go. That's the other one. One day at a time. One day at a time, man. So tell the audience a little bit about what Charm City Paranormal is, a little bit about yourself, and why you don't scream at ghosts.
Well, Charm City Paranormal was more or less an accident project that sort of started out as like, do I want to do this? Do I want to make content around the paranormal? I was originally going to be an urbex photographer, urban exploration photography.
Sure.
And the very first day that I decided to go out and get photos, I was ran out of one of the buildings by some unseen force that I had never experienced in my life up until that point. It terrified me and fascinated me at the same time. And I decided to go back on the footage that I was recording because I had a GoPro strapped to my chest. So I figured, hey, maybe I caught something.
Right.
Without knowing what any of like the paranormal terminology or lingo is, I started catching EVPs, voices, shadows, like everything that you could ever want as far as like a ghost hunting video goes. So I leaned into it really hard. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process of creating content and going on these explorations for ghosts. And then over time, it sort of evolved into more of like a personal endeavor of wanting to, I guess, better understand the afterlife and understand why this stuff happens around us and just try to make it as digestible and as engaging as possible as far as content goes. And it's just, over time, I've really grown to love what I do, and I continue to do it to this day. It's actually my, I don't want to say full-time job, but I mean, I do it full-time.
Sure. It doesn't feel like a job, right?
No, not at all.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your personal background with the paranormal and the supernatural before you got started. You kind of mentioned a little bit, not much of any, but what were kind of your personal beliefs before you kind of had this initial encounter?
Well, I've always been a fairly spiritual person. I wouldn't say that I'm really tied to any religions, but I have always believed in some sort of like afterlife or, things just existing beyond our comprehension or beyond our sight, our grasp.
Sure.
And like going into being a paranormal investigator, that thought and that belief was already there. So it was kind of already strengthened from the start, but I had never had any paranormal experiences leading up to this.
Wow.
Maybe like one or two, but it was never something that I gave much thought to. Like it would happen and I would try to rationalize it, couldn't, and I'd go to bed and wake up the next day and just forget about it.
Right.
There was nothing ever really substantial enough to really stick with me until that day that I went to go take urban exploration photos.
So where did you go where you had this encounter? I mean, is it a known haunted place, or is it kind of just...
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it is now. Forest Haven. I released a 90-minute video about that location.
Okay.
And yeah, it was 2 years
I didn't realize that was your first video, man. Like, good God. That's a hell of a thing to capture your first time out of the gate.
Yeah. That video...
that's really... that people wait their whole life for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they really do. I got lucky. I feel very fortunate that I was able to investigate that location for over 2 years before we had enough evidence that made enough sense to make that video. It really, beforehand, it was just, let's go as many times as we can, get as much evidence as we can. More evidence, more videos means more content. We can sit in the house during the winter months and edit these videos and then go back out in the summer. But somewhere along the way, like something connected somewhere that made me kind of question everything that we were doing up until that point. So I decided to revisit it and start the series over from scratch. Like after filming it for 2 years, we're like, we're going to can all this footage. We're going to go back, new cameras, new equipment, new methods, and we're going to try and figure out what is there based off of what we've already found. And the rabbit hole spiraled down so deep, and we found so much that we were able to create that 90-minute documentary that we have now. And I love that video, honestly. Like, that place is why I do what I do, but that video is also, I would say that it's mainly the reason why I edit videos. You know, like, it's easy to just cut together some content and call it a day, but I put a lot of love and energy and effort into creating that specific video. So it means so much more to me that out of all the locations I could have done that for, it was the place that got me started.
So tell our audience a little bit about Forest Haven and kind of what it is, why it is as haunted as it seems to be, kind of what's the story behind Forest Haven for those that may not know it.
Sure. So Forest Haven was not only the shortest lived psychiatric facility in America, or one of them, it was also one of the deadliest institutions in United States history as far as the mortality rate goes. So there were, I think, a peak of about 1,100 patients in there around the late 60s, early 70s, right before it started to shut down. You know, Reagan federally defunded those hospitals, and then by the 80s, they had to release everybody. But from 1925 to 1991, I might have those timelines a little off, but I know it was the early to mid 90s when they shut down. There were just constant reports of patient neglect, unexplained deaths and documented deaths that were at the hands of doctors, caretakers, nurses. They were so underfunded that they couldn't really afford the help that they needed. They couldn't hire professional help, so they were just kind of bringing anybody in, and these people were horribly underqualified to take care of people in this condition. So, I mean, people were just dying left and right. It was a 1 in 3 mortality rate. So, like, for every 3 people that went in, 1 person never left. Right. And the documented deaths were somewhere around 400, but we think it's like closer to 1,000. I mean, there's just so many like little cases that add to this bigger situation. You have children being tied to cribs and starving to death. You have people getting attacked by staff members. You have patients attacking each other. It was hell on earth.
Right.
When people would pass away in that place, they didn't have a proper burial for them. They would wheel them underground through a tunnel out to a mass grave and just dump the bodies in a giant hole and then cover it with dirt. I remember specifically one time reading in the paper when I was researching this case that the grave was so shallow that eventually weather eroded the grave, and there were staff members that worked at the jail nearby because it's all on the same lot.
Right.
They would drive by and they would see bones and rib cages and skulls poking up out of the ground because it was just that's how careless and negligent they were. The state had to come in and cement the lot so the bones would stop showing up from underneath the ground. It's just a nightmare of a place.
Right.
You have so much going on there. It's incredibly active.
So I guess, just some of the early questions, because again, I'm curious where you're personally coming at this from. When you go to an active site, what are you, at least let's talk Forest Haven specifically, what are you chalking the spirit presence up to? Are you chalking it up to the amount of negative energy that the location withstood, the amount of trauma incurred by the people there? Kind of where are you coming at it from with at least somewhere like this that's so obviously like just saturated with negative energy?
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with just so much concentrated negative energy that it is sort of manifested into its own thing, like its own unconscious entity. It's like almost like an egregore, I think is what it's called, where it's like a collective thought conscious of multiple people all thinking the same thing, creating one thing. We've had multiple mediums. Like, we've had one go with us to the location, and we've had 2 remote view in. None of them knew each other, and they all have said the same thing about a dark presence being there. Once we were given that information, we went out and actually acknowledged the being that is supposedly there. It's very violent, very chaotic situation, and that's also in the video. But I think it's a combination of like collective thought and souls trapped in limbo. Like, they don't know where to go. When the place closed, they had nowhere to go. They had no family. They had no one to come pick them up. And there were a lot of patients that stayed there long after the facility had shut down because, it's like, I don't have anywhere else to go. So I'm just going to stay here in this abandoned place and let it fall apart around me. And a lot of people died there, and that's the last place that they remember. So I think that, excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Hey, it's okay.
I'm sorry.
I have 3 dogs and 2 cats, man. Do not apologize to me.
Yeah, he's a little menace sometimes. He likes to bark when the mail gets delivered. So,
what kind of dog is it?
A Yorkie.
Okay, we have 2 Chihuahuas, so you can see why I empathize completely. They're quiet now.
Yeah,
they're quiet lucky. For now.
He's been quiet all day until he's Dad's upstairs recording a podcast. Better make all the noise possible.
It's okay. That's what post-production's for, man.
Absolutely.
That's what we're not doing this fucking thing live.
Good. Thank God.
I'm not fucking insane, man. You're talking to the person who's going to edit it, so you're good. Like right. I'm
like, man, I hope he cuts this or like
no, you're fine. Way. You're fine, man. No, I've had way worse. I literally had, unbeknownst to me, I had my appendix close to bursting while I was recording an episode a couple years ago. Yeah, and I boot and rallied in the toilet twice and finished the episode. And then later that evening, I was in the ER. And then within 24 hours, my appendix was out. Yeah, so dogs barking, like that's nothing.
I thought he was going to stop, and then I kept talking, and I'm like, he's going to keep going.
It's okay.
Keep doing it. Okay.
As long as he doesn't, as long as he's not barking when you're talking, I could just cut it out. It's no big deal, or just silence it out. It's no concern, man. You're good. I get it though.
Let me backtrack a bit. So
sure. I think you were talking about the place falling down around these people. They had nowhere to go.
They had nowhere to go.
Super uplifting stuff, really.
Extremely. But
wards of the state dying in buildings that the state no longer wants to take care of. Yes, very positive information being shared.
Overall, it's a very dark location. It's not like most places that I've been to. And, you go to these hauntings, like these older hauntings, Gettysburg or like old manors or inns and things like that. Typically it's like peaceful energy or very neutral, calm. You don't really get a whole lot, but you go to Forest Haven and it's like, something surrounds you. I mean, I've had countless messages of people who are local to Baltimore and Laurel that I've never met before that have seen that video. And they're like, I know exactly the feeling that you describe in that video because I've felt it too. Like there are people that have messaged me saying, I went into this building 10 years before you even made this video. And I felt the same thing that you felt. So it's like, it's not just me. It's not something that I'm imagining, it's the energy in that place is so heavy and dark and just overwhelming to the point that as soon as you walk in, within 10 minutes, you're ready to leave. It's just the place pushes you out. It's not a friendly place by any means. And I don't know. I don't know if I could even really go back there. Like I'm supposed to create a part 2 and part 3 to the chapter, to the series. There's a chapter 1 out right now. And I honestly don't know after dealing with it for 2 years if I can go back to it.
Well, and that was another question I had for you, because I've only ever spoken with one other paranormal investigator, but they focus primarily on one location. They go to that location all the time. That's kind of their bread and butter, as it were. That place being the Goatman Bridge in Denton, Texas. Friend of mine, she does a lot of tours out there. But like, I was a question I had for you, because you kind of mentioned, you've been going. Had been going there for 2 years, which is a long time. I mean, 6 months is a long time, let alone 24 months. So you mentioned that you had wanted to do a second and third chapter to this, but now there's some trepidation. I guess that trepidation stems from worries of what might happen should you go back, worries of how the place would react to you going back. Kind of, I guess, where does your trepidation stem from?
Well, once we figured out what was there and we figured out about this, like we figured out the dark energy or whatever is lingering in that place, when we acknowledged it, it changed the entire dynamic of how we investigate the location and how it reacts to us being there. Beforehand, it was just different energies, different ghosts coming and speaking with us through devices or setting off devices. But I think because we didn't have the information on that darker entity, it was more or less lingering around without making himself too known.
Right.
And then we acknowledged it, and it's like, okay, I'm here now. We're all aware of each other. I'm really gonna mess with you now. So when we go, I've been like shoved. I've had really bad episodes of like lightheadedness, dizziness. nausea, feeling weak. I've gotten into arguments with my investigation partner at this location, which we never really have issues like that ever. And then we leave and everything's fine. I don't even really remember why I got mad at him in the first place. It just tries to separate you from your group and cause as much emotional anguish as possible. Like it tries to make you feel what it was created to do, because you have to think all these people, thousands and thousands of people are going in and out of this place over the course of 66 years, and they're all feeling the same thing, the same thoughts, the same emotions. It's just getting dumped into this building or these buildings and not going anywhere. So if this dark energy, whatever it is, was created from those terrible emotions, that's all it knows. So that's all it's going to do to other people. So I don't know. I don't know if I could go back there and continue to face that. It has a lot of long-term repercussions on my mental health and my physical well-being.
Which I feel like is something that doesn't get talked about enough with this line of work or area of study. I think it's a better way of putting it, because it's not, I mean, it's a job, but there are a few jobs like what you do that take that mental and emotional and, again, like you said, physical toll on you, because it's all encompassing. I mean, I've only ever been to a handful of haunted places, and I have not had nearly the experiences that you've had, or the one or two times, let alone 2 years worth, obviously. So I've always wondered what it was like. But, again, like I think that's something that kind of gets overlooked by the population at large who enjoys this kind of content, is that whether or not they believe it, it should be obvious that standing in a dark room late at night doesn't do a lot of positive benefits for your mental health.
No,
it just doesn't. It just doesn't. And I mean, we're so sheltered, I think, anymore as people in a rather connected society, that to go out into the woods and turn a flashlight off is not something people have done very frequently. And that's scary enough as it is. Just being out in the woods is fucking scary. Like, I don't, that's what I feel like people don't appreciate this idea that, like, you're going somewhere, like you said, that has a very traumatic history, and it's not even questioned. It's like reported on multiple times. It's a known thing. And like, if people are expecting something to not happen, that's fine. But when things do happen, I don't understand why people are so surprised. But they need to understand the toll that it does take on you. Because, and again, I think that the industry at large doesn't have that conversation either. I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't see the bigger names in this field talking about the way it affects them personally after the fact. It's always during the haunting or during the investigation or during the excursion. They're talking about it, but rarely do you hear anyone saying, well, this is, I don't want to do this again because I don't want to face, like what you said, like, I don't want to face this.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with the TV networks and the people that are writing these shows. It really falls on them to want to expose that side of paranormal investigating. And that's, I mean, it's TV, like they want ratings. Edited. Yeah, they want ratings. They want entertainment. They want engagement. And that isn't entertaining or engaging to a large majority of people. I mean, the average person that watches this will never go on a ghost hunt. Or if they do, they'll go on like a public tour or, the spooky ghost walks where they walk around their local old historic town and they have somebody carry a lantern and tell ghost stories for an hour. Like that's about as close as they're going to get to it. They're not.
Which, to say there's nothing wrong with that.
There's not.
But it is a lot safer. Like early on in the show, had a woman from Denton, Texas, who does exactly what you're talking about. Gives kind of the town square tours, tells the ghost stories. Sometimes she brings a medium in. But like the places that she takes people to, they're still well lit. It's still a store where people are buying things. Currently, like one of them is a big bookstore that I go to every time I go home. Like, is it creepy? Yeah, but the lights are still on. There's still people in there. Like, it's not abandoned in the middle of nowhere with vines and shit growing everywhere. Yeah. I have a hard time understanding people going like, well, this is all fake. It's like, you wouldn't even, like you said, you wouldn't even step foot in a real one of these places. Most people would never even contemplate driving down a path with leaves that is overgrown to get to any number of these places that are hard to get to on top of everything else. It's not like you're just driving down a road to this place. A lot of these places you have to hoof it to get there. I'm assuming, correct?
Oh yeah. It's close to a mile one way through the woods that if you go in the middle of the summer, like the ticks are going to destroy you. I don't know why that patch of woods is just so infested with them, but I have literally pulled 40 plus ticks off of me in the middle of the summer just to go film at this place. So like we go through a lot to go through this. And to touch back on what you said about people faking things, just use discernment. It's not that hard to watch a video and you can tell within 5, maybe 10 minutes if somebody is full of shit or not. Like it's, I don't know. Like I got started on my channel and what I do because of my experiences. I didn't even know that there was like this massive paranormal community that backed all this stuff. I didn't watch it. I was an IT guy for like 10 years, you know, and
which is interesting, which is interesting for me because I don't have that background either. I'm just in a lot of ways, someone who wants to believe, right? Like I want to believe in this stuff. I have that, but with a healthy dose of skepticism. I think it's interesting to hear you coming from a completely 180 background into this.
Yeah, I had zero, like I didn't watch any of the TV shows growing up. I didn't go on ghost hunts as a kid or like fantasize about it. Again, I was in IT. So like I had my world. I was either building computers or, you know, coding video games or playing guitar. Like I didn't care about any of this. Not to say like I had any reservations against it. I just, you know, I had my niche and it had nothing to do with ghosts or the paranormal. So it really, when it got a hold of me, it death gripped. Like I'm so invested in what I do now and believe in it so firmly that I really don't think there's anything that could take away from that or change that for me. And I think that's crazy and cool at the same time for me to just go from like never having any involvement with this to being fully involved into it.
0 to 180. I mean, kind of it's what's weird is some of the stories that you hear about people like yourself who get involved in paranormal investigation, a lot of them are like they were doing something else, but they were still involved with the creation of content in some form or fashion. Like you said, you were out there doing urban, you know, photography. I mean, I'm sure that there are other people like yourself, right? But it's few and far between versus the people that are already super into this. And this was just like an easy thing to continue to do or to adopt as another thing I do. Because, you know, like you said, it goes from taking a ghost tour to going on a ghost investigation to then you start your own thing. I mean, that seems to be the way because a lot of the people that are doing these things, like you've mentioned, are kind of, they're already into it, but you weren't, that's an interesting perspective. And I think it also, at least for me, watching your videos on your channel, it comes through in the way that you present the content because it's very low key, which I appreciate. I don't want to use the term that gets thrown around a lot, but it's very much a vibe. And I think you know that. But I think I think it's a good counterpoint to, I would just say Zach Bagans, right? Like his content is very aggressive. Yeah. I think I don't know how else to put it. I was watching old episodes of his show and he's full on screaming at the ghosts.
I don't understand that.
That's what you're not supposed to do. That's what I've been told by other people. I'm sure you'll tell me that. But
yeah, you're not supposed to do that at all.
Like, what in my mind, does that not invalidate you as a serious paranormal investigator essentially outright if all you're doing is trying to provoke the ghosts? But at the same time, take yourself, be taken seriously by the community at large?
I mean, you got to look at it more so like, I feel like it's a generational gap with ghost hunting. Like he managed to stay relevant for 13 seasons and counting. So like he got very lucky, I would say, as far as like being able to carry the show season after season. So you have like this previous generation who watched him and still watch his shows. So it gives him an audience. But then if you compare him to people of like my age group or your age group who are a completely different generation, different audience, you know, we're used to seeing things done differently. So I don't know. It's kind of like if I could make like a music comparison, like, you know, POD can still tour because they were huge back in the 90s and early 2000s. But if you played that same music to somebody who's like 18 now, they're like, what the hell is this? You listen to this? Like, yeah, dude, millions of people listen to this. And they would go like, no way, no fucking way. They don't listen to this.
Woodstock 99 was real for a reason, man.
Yeah, I know. But like, I think
that was a real thing, unfortunately. Yeah, people listen to, but I think you're right. It's that weird aggressive energy that I think is leaving content creation in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think people want to stand for it anymore.
No, and it worked in the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, but then times have changed. People's attitudes and outlooks on it have changed. And for me personally, I don't like it because I try to look at energy, spirits, entities, things like that as I would treat it the same way I'm having a conversation here with you right now. Right. If I'm screaming at you and being super aggressive, you're going to stop recording and the podcast is going to be over with. You're not even going to have an episode. You're gonna
Are you sure? Are you sure you want to find out? Start screaming. Who knows?
Hypothetically speaking, the podcast would be over, but I don't know. I just try to treat them the way that I want to be treated, and I think it works. I mean, we get great evidence all the time, and it just gets better and better as each video progresses.
Well, and I don't think that there's as low of a ceiling for what you're doing either. I think with that kind of content, there's a rather low ceiling, because where do you go when you've spent half of your time screaming at the ghosts? Or are you going to start whispering all of a sudden? Like, you know what I mean? Like, short of pulling out a fucking proton pack and shooting at ghosts, like, I don't know what the logical next step is past screaming aggressively at spirits. Like, what is the next step beyond that? There's nothing.
You could fake possession, but that's about the only thing that I can
right. I mean, short of faking things, which again, you're an editor, you edit your stuff, so you get it. But at the same time, like, they edit their stuff too. But I don't think that they're editing. I know for a fact they're not editing it the way you edit your stuff, or anybody who's making anything that they're posting with their own name on YouTube, because your name is tied directly to it. People know who to come to if it looks fake or it feels fake or you've been faking it. They know who to come to. With Zach Bagans, it's like, who do you go after? Like the editor, it's kind of a nebulous person to get angry at.
Yeah, there's a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy that will take the blame for all of the fakery or the fraud.
Right. We needed something to happen to keep the ratings up, and it's like, okay, like, fine. But I guess another question that I have for you, kind of regarding the other folks in the space and kind of where you are in the space, when you go to these other places, and do you interact with other paranormal investigators?
Occasionally, we've collabed with a few other people. We've gone with, I would say, like 3 or 4 other teams. We just did an investigation with Paranormal Files at Gettysburg, which that went really well. I really like working with him. He's a great guy. He's very down to earth and honest and sincere in what he does. And we all got along super well. But I'm very particular about who I work with, not because I hold anything against anybody. I don't know. Like, I feel like I really got to get to know who you are first before I commit to spending time and money and setting up equipment and then going to these locations, knowing where your headspace is at, where your energy's at, if you're going to fake stuff or not, if like you're going to be respectful, you're not going to be screaming at the ghosts or, asking for like a circus act and play with this device and set off that light and like just demanding things. I don't know. I really try to look at it from all different angles. And if I feel like if the interaction goes well and continues to go well for a while, then I might consider investigating with somebody. But oftentimes I just prefer to go with like one other person, or, here soon, I'm probably going to start going by myself.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. I'm that desensitized to this at this point. Like, I kind of want something to scare me just so I can be reminded of why I started doing this in the first place. Cause it doesn't scare me anymore, like at all.
What do you chalk that desensitization up to? Just proximity and length of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I do it so much. Like for the last 2 months almost, I have investigated every single week for 2 months. And I mean,
I would see what you mean.
Yeah, from like really dark places to really light places. Like I just did Cresson Sanatorium. I did a follow-up to that. I haven't released it yet, but
I would say that's a good original video as well. Was one of the first ones that I watched. It's man.
Yeah. It was intense, and we went back and it was even more intense the second time. But then we went to Gettysburg as like a small group, and I was, I'm like holding the K2 meter, nodding off, just falling asleep because nothing is happening. Like nothing was going on that night. And I'm just, again, I'm so desensitized to it at this point that I'm not saying it always has to be a dark haunting or something negative or evil for me to be interested in it, but
Right.
all the good stuff seems to happen at those types of locations. So that's kind of what I want.
Well, it's kind of like anything else, right? You have to ramp it up, and then I mean, it's like screaming at ghosts, right? Like you're going to progressively worse and worse places.
Yeah,
getting more kind of. Would you say you get? I mean, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but do you genuinely feel like you get more from more turbulent places? That turbulent in reality, in corporeal existence, with people doing terrible things and dying. Do you feel like you get more there than it just, somewhere else that's less negative?
I don't know. I mean, from my experience, yes, I have gotten that. But in general, like if you were to ask anybody else, I want to say no. I think it really has a lot to do with the person going where their headspace and their energy is at and how they choose to approach it. Because I've gone to like very subtle, neutral hauntings. Wildwood Sanatorium, for example, that one was like, there was nothing negative or angry there. It was a very subtle, neutral haunting, but we still got quite a bit of evidence. So I think it has more to do with the person than the actual location. But to answer your question, yes, I think that the darker places definitely give you more because they want attention. Like they want to be acknowledged.
Right. And I think, you talked a little bit about working with other people and that kind of the idea of making sure everybody's kind of energies are aligned. I feel like that's also a thing that gets overlooked in doing this, is really working with the right people, because you could be bringing the wrong kind of energy into a situation unbeknownst to yourself, really, if you're not 100% aware as to what your co-investigators are doing. Mm-hmm. Which I mean, I get that from a content creation standpoint. Like, you really need to be careful who you work with for a number of reasons. But when you're talking about in the spiritual realm, like I would almost not want to go with other people.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm getting to. Like, there's a handful of people that I will very eagerly work with, at the drop of a dime, without hesitation. If they called me right now and said, I have an investigation this weekend and I need your help, I would be there. But most people, I'm very cautious about. I'm just a cautious person in general. Like, it's not even to do with ghost hunting, but just in general, like being around certain people, hanging out with certain people. So when we're speaking in the sense of paranormal investigating, like I've worked with people, I've done investigations with people where we got nothing and we've been to that location several times. So I knew it had something to do with the person that I was working with, because then we'd go back without that person and a bunch of stuff would happen. So I've seen it. Like, I've seen it in person. I've watched us get 0 on an investigation, all because of one person, and they're either not being forthcoming about their, like, where they're at in their head or their beliefs or whatever. So it's a very real thing. I think that spirits just won't waste the energy to prove their existence to somebody who doesn't truly fully accept it and is open to it. It'd be the same as trying to talk to somebody while they turn their back to you. Like, you're not going to waste that energy. Why would you sit there and talk to that person? They're not paying attention to you. So I think it works the same way.
Unless you want to really expend that large amount of energy all at once. Or use that. Them? Yeah. I mean, again, you have had interactions, as a lot of paranormal investigators have, of the physical variety, which, at the Velisca house.
Oh man.
I mean, seeing 4 little fingers wrapping around your waist is not like, that's not a small thing. You know what I mean? Like, what the amount of energy that must take has to be an immense amount, right?
I think so. And to talk a little bit about Velisca, that place was just messing with us mentally so much. Like, there were things that we would see on the camera that we didn't see in person, or we'd see it in person, but the camera didn't see it. I was seeing certain things that Ethan wasn't seeing, and vice versa. It was just such a mind fuck. That place messed with us mentally so bad. It took me like 8 months to fully recover from that trip. Like, I didn't investigate for 4 or 5 months after that. And 3 months after that, I had to just double down on my mental health and my physical health, because that whole situation it really messed with me in a way that I've never been messed with, and still really haven't been messed with since.
I guess having never been there, but it's within driving distance from me. What is happening to you and your investigative partner in the video? I've seen other people. I do know several other people who have been, but I'm curious. Having talked to other people, I'm sure you have. Do your stories track with the other stories and the other experiences that people had? Are they worse? Are they more intense? Are they not as intense?
Some do track with each other. We've had several people reach out to us, or at least reach out to me in the past and say, like, this has happened to me as well in this spot, or this happened here, which is kind of similar, but just in a different area. It's most of the events that happen there are uniquely tailored to you. I feel like whatever is in there will sort of analyze you for a bit, get to figure you out, know who you are, and then act accordingly. So there's a general consensus when it comes to certain events that happened, like especially in the attic where the killer supposedly hid. It's a pretty common occurrence for people to feel certain overwhelming emotions in there and have certain overwhelming things happen to them. But overall, the place just tailors itself to you. Like we were hearing stories about, right before we went, a group had showed up. It was a group of like 4 older women. I think they were all like middle-aged, and they were going there to talk to the kids. And all night they talked to the kids, and the kids were rolling a balloon back and forth to them, and it was very peaceful. Nobody felt scared. We went there. We talked shit to the killer and taunted him, and we were going out every like 30 minutes because it was just getting so overwhelming that I had to, I guess, like essentially break the grasp of the house on us and go outside and reset. We'd sit outside for 15 minutes, go back in for 30, reset for 15. I mean, it was just in and out all night long. We couldn't stay in there for longer than half an hour. So it just kind of goes back on what I said about the house, more or less catering its haunting to you.
Well, that's pretty intense, to feel that way about the house, because I mean, again, like plenty of people go all kinds of places and they don't have what would be considered, at least by your approximation, personal experiences in the house. But what you're talking about and what happens in that video does feel more focused directly at you specifically, as opposed to just, you could be in a house with a spirit and the spirit's just knocking shit off the walls. But if the spirit knows you're in the house and knows you, different story entirely. Mm-hmm. Or is focus, or putting its focus onto you, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that it honestly, it took me a while to realize that too. Like when I edited that video, it seemed like there was stuff happening to both of us, but I definitely took the situation a lot more personally. I'm an uncle. Like I have young nieces and nephews. I love them to death. I could never imagine something like that happening to them, let alone 6 kids. And it really messed with me because it's one thing to sit back at home and watch a video on your phone or on your TV and you hear this story and you're like, oh, that's tragic. But then you go into the house and you sit on the same bed that like a 5-year-old got bludgeoned in. And I don't know, it hits you in a certain way that for me personally, I just felt rage the whole time. Like I just wanted to fucking strangle the killer because it's like, how could you do this to a whole family? And Ethan didn't feel that. Ethan felt sadness the whole time. He just felt like sorrow. So it was a very wild set of emotions between the two of us. And I think because of my anger and the way that I was feeling, the house started to do a lot more to me. It started to mess with me a lot more. And I don't know, I guess make me feel the way that I felt. But yeah, the house is a very personal experience. If you ever do decide to go, my best advice would be to be as cautious and respectful as possible. I mean, if you're cool with taunting, you can, call him a shitbag, do all the stuff that we did, but I don't recommend it at all.
I know we have not known each other for very long, but I hope I don't strike you as the kind of person who might do that. I would only if I knew the repercussions of what it meant to do it, which I think is the issue here, right? Like in my mind, you got to know, at least put yourself, at least mentally prepare yourself for what could happen should you decide to taunt a ghost or a spirit or whatever they are. Because again, I mean, it's the Villisca Axe House is just, it's similar to a place that I have visited. And I was curious if it is on your radar or if you have visited it yet and you haven't released an episode. Have you heard of you've heard of the Sally House, right?
Yeah. That's absolutely on my list.
Yeah. That place is, so I have been there. We did not. Yeah, it's like 3 hours from. And you can stay overnight for a nominal fee. You can go in and hang out for the afternoon for a nominal fee. You can. Look, nothing happened. I'm not going to sit here and play Mr. Pretend and, we had all these great experiences. We didn't. We went in, stayed for a couple hours. This was the weekend before the pandemic in 2020. So like March 7th, 2020, something like that. No experiences. We ran my phone's recorder. I know phone recorders are not nearly as good as any of the other actual physical recorders, especially the one that everybody wants to have that gets all the nice little EVPs. I know. It's only $3,000 on eBay and it was made in the late 90s. I don't understand. It gets all this stuff all the time. Yeah, it sure does. All the time. All the time. Every time. It's very convenient. Yes. But I will tell you, I have not been into many places where the energy is as foreboding as that place is. So I know what you mean, but it also scared me. Because again, to see someone coming at you with a knife is one thing, but to not understand why you feel like you're in a room with people hiding in the corners is another. And that's just not something that you can explain to someone, really. Yeah. Now that's sounding crazy anyways to the average person. Right. Well, so is the Sally House on your list of places to go? Absolutely. I've been wanting to go to that house pretty much since I heard about it, right around the time that we booked the Villisca Axe house. It's just it's really just a matter of getting out there. Like I wanted to go out there either this month or next month, but I ended up taking on, I do weekend tours now at this theater. I do like private investigations for small groups. Nice. And that's eating up like all my time. And now I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out there because there's no way I'm going to Kansas in December. It's not happening. I would tell you to not do that. Yeah, I'm not doing that. There's like no heat in there, right? I don't remember, honestly. I don't. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I don't know. There has to. I think there has to be. It's technically a working house. Somebody owns it. I believe the city might even own it. I wouldn't go because in the winter, it's on an inclined hill in the wintertime in Kansas. Like you might get stuck at the Sally House for a couple days. You don't want that. No, I'm just asking for it at that point. Right. Like if you want to not leave at your own volition, that's fine. But if you can't leave because you literally can't, that's another. It's something else. I saw it back in the day on Sightings. And they had the whole Haunting in the Heartland thing where the guy was getting scratched on the face, getting scratched on the arm, getting scratched on the stomach by the ghost. And then sitting in the house that I had seen on Sightings that had scared me as a child was just a trip, to say the least. Oh, I bet. It's scary. I mean, it is a scary, weird house. There's nothing inherently scary about it, but it's just to know what has happened, right? But I think, a lot of these places that are haunted, nothing ever happens to anybody. It's hard to explain. Like I want to put credence into some of the stories and I do believe everybody. But like you said, if your energy doesn't match up, nothing is going to happen anyways. That. And I also think that people like the stories tend to come from the owners who, I hate to say it this way, but are trying to make their money. They're trying to get their bills paid. And if they're like, it's kind of haunted. I mean, it's a little haunted. We, like 4 years ago, we had a ghost touch a K2 meter. Nobody's going to book that. People aren't going to fly from all around the country and all around the world to maybe get a K2 meter touched. But if somebody's getting half their face torn off and their belly ripped open, they're going to be like, shit, I'm signing up for this. Why? I don't know. People are kind of sick, but they're going to sign up for it. Well, I mean, and again, like you mentioned Forest Haven and then SCI Cresson, like you had some experiences there that like you mentioned, the people who go on the Cincinnati ghost experience in downtown Cincinnati, they're not getting that. No. That's very it's very just clean. It's a very sanitized. Yeah, it's a very sanitized experience, right? And just to be clear, I am one of those people, by the way. I will go to the Sally House to get my face torn off if it means that it's actually going to happen. But it's if you do go, I will be curious because I don't know if you listen to Astonishing Legends, but they have gone several times. They're a pretty well-known kind of paranormal supernatural podcast, and they got some pretty wild EVPs.
Yeah.
Of things like screaming. But again, they also got it on the little recorder that we're talking about. So
the DR60.
Yep, the DR60, which is, how much is it now on eBay? Like $1,300, $1,400, or is it more now? More?
It's like starting out at like $2,800. I just saw one go up for a bid. Somebody put the starting bid at $50. Within an hour, it was up to $1,250. It's probably going to sell tomorrow. I think, tomorrow is the last day of the listing. I don't even know what it's up to now, but I saw a brand new sealed in package one for $7,500. $7,500 for a $30 recorder. I don't care how good that thing is. I can put a down payment on a nice house for $7,500.
So tell our audience a little bit about what the DR60 is, because we're talking about it in terms of people who know what it is, but it's a pretty big deal in the paranormal investigative community, at least if you can afford it, level of paranormal investigation.
So the DR60 was Panasonic's like revolutionary new digital recorder that came out in the early or late 90s, and people were returning it en masse and were complaining about hearing voices of other people. So they pulled the whole line. They came out with like the QR60 or the QR80, something like that, which, spoiler alert, if people don't know this, the internal components of the first edition QR80 are the exact same internal components as the DR60, just the first edition one. There's multiple editions, but the very first edition of the QR80 is exactly the same as the DR60, just a different case. And they're significantly cheaper, like a couple $100. Watch, now they're going to fucking skyrocket.
Right. The secret's out, folks.
Yeah, but
Charm City Paranormal let it out of the bag.
I did it. It was me. But they pulled the line and did some testing. It turns out that there was like some kind of internal circuit or capacitor that was far too close to the microphone, which was causing feedback. And that's really all it was. But the theory is that spirits, energies, ghosts, whatever, tend to manipulate frequency because they don't have a voice. Like, they can't talk to us. We can't hear them. So they manipulate certain frequencies in order to create what sounds like an audible voice. So the DR60 being built faulty the way that it was, I think, I'm not sure if this is true. I could be totally wrong. I'm probably going to piss somebody off by saying this, but I think the capacitor being so close to the microphone is what's giving the spirits the ability to have such a clear voice. So that's why it's so popular. Like, newer models of voice recorders, digital voice recorders, they have all these built-in noise filters and compressors and all this stuff to create this crystal clear audio, which is filtering out a lot of EVPs and voices that we would hear. Whereas the DR60 has zero filters, zero compression. It's just a very basic board, microphone, capacitors, all soldered together to capture audio. So I think because there's no filters on it in any way, it's able to easily pick up voices. And that's why we get these crystal clear responses every single time, because there's nothing to filter that noise out.
So you do put some level of credence into the DR60 then?
Only because I have actually worked with somebody who owns two of them. Okay. And I've seen it in person. Like, I've watched them hit record, ask questions, go back, and then a bunch of crazy stuff come through, and I was standing right there with them when it happened. So I know that they didn't do anything to mess with it.
And I feel like that's where I need to be with it.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to see somebody like, here you go. Now ask a question, hit record, turn it off and play. Like, I otherwise, I'm not saying I won't believe it, but like, otherwise, how has nobody just copied what they did with it and done it again?
That's a very good question. I think it's because of the way that it was designed, and people, because it's so expensive and so hard to come by, nobody is going to spend $3 or $4 grand to disassemble this thing and reverse engineer it. But Yeah, I was right there with you. And even after using one, I'm still kind of like on the fence about it, just because like I've gotten, we've had discussions about EVPs that this person thought it said this, but I thought it said that. So they're not always class A guaranteed foolproof, but nobody's willing to disassemble it, for one. And for two, unless you go and see it for yourself and you actually get to use one and hold it in your hands, you're really not going to understand the hype behind it. And even if you do, like, I'm still not spending that much money on a $30 voice recorder. I'm just not doing it.
I think that's the bigger problem. It's like, if this is what's stopping me from getting good EVP recordings from ghosts, like, maybe I don't need them then.
No.
And to be fair, you're not using that when you go out on your investigations, and you've gotten some very clear EVPs.
Yeah. I was actually recording some of my footage on my old phone. I think some of Forest Haven and some of even the Villisca Axe House. Actually, the entire Villisca Axe House video. My camera was having like terrible malfunctions with the microphone, with exposure settings. There was just a bunch of stuff going on. I had to get a new camera, but the whole Axe House video was recorded on a Galaxy S9 with the internal microphone. So I don't know what it is.
That's magic. That's real magic right there.
I know. I mean, it was a ton of like editing and compression and balancing the audio, making it sound good. But for some reason, the Galaxy S9 microphone is so good at getting EVPs. Like, I don't know why.
Now you're going to drive that fucking thing up.
It is.
The DR60s awesome. Go down in price, and the Galaxy S9s go up in price.
You're going to go on eBay and see a used S9 for like $1,200 now. The ultimate ghost hunting gear. Like,
Galaxy S9.
No, but it's really good. And also just really any old digital recorder that doesn't take USB and is like from I want to say the early to mid 90s, Sony, Olympus, Panasonic,
RCA,
Zoom, RCA, like basically anything that doesn't have all of the high tech noise filters and compression and all that stuff, just a very basic bare bones recorder. You could find those on eBay for $20-$30. And as long as it creates a little bit of background distortion, you'll get good EVPs.
So I wanted to ask you something, because the spirit box is a thing. It maybe not in the community of paranormal investigators. There's no contention with it. Is there? Or is there that I'm not hearing about? Because I appreciate, you have no idea how much I appreciate. I forget which video you literally break down what it's doing. I think it's the Villisca House one where you're like, this is what the spirit box does. Here's how it works, and this is what it's doing. I guess my question to you is there a group of people in the community who feel a certain way about the spirit box that I'm not hearing about, or is the entire community on board with the spirit box, even knowing what it does?
If there is anybody that has qualms with it, I personally haven't heard anything myself. Okay. I think the general consensus is that people like it in small doses. It's very hard to sit there and listen to that, the static for 10, 15 minutes at a time. I think I try to limit them to like 2 to 3 minute sessions within the video. If you're willing to sit there and listen to that god-awful static for half an hour just to get your answers, then I think it's a great tool. I've gotten incredible responses from it. It's just, there's really no way to filter out that white noise without missing crucial EVPs. You can filter it out. I have a filter for it. I just don't use it because I tend to lose a lot of information when I use it versus just letting the white noise, play out throughout the entire session.
So what are you kind of lending credence to how the spirits are able to communicate through the spirit box? What do you think that process is, and how do you interpret it when it comes to you on your end?
Ooh, I haven't actually had a chance to like really sit down and formulate a good theory on this, but from what I have gathered, just based on my experiences, so I think
sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna do my best.
I ask hard and weird questions sometimes, but they tend to yield interesting answers.
So obviously spirits don't have a physical body, and we as humans communicate using vocal cords, which is a physical thing in our bodies. That's how you're able to hear me. That's how I'm able to hear you. But because these are ethereal beings and they don't have a way to create a vibration with a throat, how are they going to communicate with us? Do they use frequencies? Do they use light? Do they use a combination of the two? So some of this theory is more or less borrowed from other ideas in conjunction with my own thoughts on it. But I think that spirits can manipulate frequencies to mimic words and sentences that is understandable from the user's perspective. So it doesn't have to be like, just kind of spitballing here. I feel like if there's a ghost hunter in India, that ghost can be understood by that ghost hunter. Or if there's a ghost hunter in China, that ghost can be understood by that ghost, and so on. I don't think there's like a language barrier with it. I think it's just more so being able to manipulate the frequencies just enough to make it a legible sound to whoever is the end user. So like if I'm running a spirit box, if there's enough energy in the room and the spirit that I'm trying to communicate with has a certain level of energy to be able to communicate, they can probably use some of that to manipulate the frequencies so that way they can create a legible sound that I can understand either in real time or when I go home and edit the video. So again, it's just like some rough spitball theory that I put together with gum and tape. But yeah, I think that they're able to balance out the sounds around us in a way that is understandable. And that's the only way that they can communicate with us.
I have a very, I don't know, the spirit box. It's one of those things where a buddy of mine and I will game in the evening and we'll normally have something on in the background. And one of the things that we tend to put on is Ghost Adventures just for the mood of it. There's nothing else like it that you can watch really other than your kind of stuff. But I like to give your stuff attention as opposed to just like it's background noise and he's yelling at ghosts, whatever.
It's a comfort show.
Yeah, sure. But it always is interesting to me. The usage of the spirit box always feels like they have to they could never be honest with what it is. They never tell you what it is, but you do, which I appreciate. Do you know what I mean? It's very weird that it feels like if anybody said out loud, we're scanning the radio frequencies, like people would check out immediately.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, where else are you going to have access to an ongoing rolling continuous stream of verbal dialogue other than frequency, AM or FM frequency? Mm-hmm. Somebody's always talking, saying something on AM or FM frequency constantly. So why else would you, what other way could ghosts or spirits tap into an ongoing dialogue that they could manipulate other than radio frequency waves, which thankfully we can't see anyways?
I don't know, honestly. And that also, you bring up a good point about that too, about the voices coming through. I think that the spirit box is more or less a combination of frequency manipulation as well as like almost like a Bumblebee situation from Transformers. You know how Bumblebee would stop on stations that had certain statements and phrases right at the time that he needed them in order to communicate? That's my point.
Yeah, it's like a constant rolling dialogue. Like,
yeah.
If you were to take my body of work that I've done with my show, which is probably a couple 100 hours of stuff, and just roll it constantly and check in from time to time, you would hear things that might make sense to you should you ask the right question. It's just inevitable, right? But if you're knowingly pointing it at those things, then it has meaning, at least giving it that meaning, or ascribing meaning to it.
Yeah, and I think that's where discernment should come into play. I think that, if you hear Katy Perry cut through with like 3 lyrics of her song and it just so happens to make sense with the question that you're asking, maybe, potentially, but probably not. Like, I don't know. Again, I think that's just a matter of discernment, and people will choose to believe whatever they want to believe, regardless if it's the truth or not. Right. So you always have to take the spirit box with a grain of salt and the responses that come through it. That's why I like to do the Estes method, because you can't hear anything that's coming from the spirit box except for like the only person that can hear it is the wearer, like the headphone wearer. So if I'm blindfolded and I have static blasting through my ears and I can't hear a single word that you're saying to me, but I'm answering your questions like 5 out of 10 times it's accurate, it's correct, then it's like a matter of like, okay, well, either he's faking it and he's just like throwing in truth mixed in with lies to kind of throw the audience off, or that's actually what was said. And it becomes a matter of like, you have to be there. It's like the DR60 situation. Like, you have to be there and experience it for yourself to really like believe it, or at least believe it. For me, I didn't know what the Estes method was for the longest time, and I saw somebody do it, and I'm like, he's the headphones are turned down. He can hear everything that's being said. This is too accurate. And then
Did you watch Hellier too? That's where that's where I saw it. They do that. They do the Estes method a ton in Hellier.
I've been wanting to watch that. I hear
they do it a bunch
Greg
in there
on Twitter, but I haven't got it. I think I've watched like 1 or 2 episodes. It's just, again, working so much. I barely have time except to sleep, but I do know that what's his name? Carl Pfeiffer.
Carl, yep. He was the one who essentially not created it, but he made it pretty famous by using it in Hellier. He brought it to them essentially because they do it a bunch in the show. It was Carl and somebody else. I can't remember the other guy's name. The short guy on the show.
Yeah, they started it, I think, in 2016 in Estes Park, Colorado, at the Stanley. So that's the name Estes Method. I did
otherwise known as the place where everybody that I live goes for vacation.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding. Like the amount of people that go to Estes Park from where I live for vacation, it's like if you live here, you've probably been at least once, probably twice to the Stanley.
Well, I mean, it's so god awful famous, man.
It's only like 6 hours away too. It's not bad. Oh, it's a close getaway for people here. Only. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't mind driving, but
I don't either.
People here do, but yeah, I think the thing that I appreciate about the Estes method is it puts a kind of natural safeguard in by having you removed. I mean, especially if you're in another room, like at SCI, is it SCI Cresson where you guys were doing that? Mm-hmm. Where, I mean, one of you is like completely removed from the other one. So it's like a level of not credibility, but it kind of takes a level of skepticism out because it's like, well, they're doing everything that they can to show you that they're playing with an honest hand of cards. Cause that's the problem, right? Like you said, like, do they have the thing turned down? Is it not, that something else, like by being removed from the other person and all that, like you're really giving the audience or your viewers, like the idea that you are taking this as seriously as the people who are watching it are hoping you're taking it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you remove as many factors as possible and just narrow it down to like you said, somebody else being in a different room, using walkie-talkies and turning the walkie-talkie just low enough to where the camera can hear it, blindfolded, noise-canceling headphones at that, as loud as it can go. I try to remove all possibilities of somebody being like, well, you did this or you did that, and that's why I don't believe it. Like, there's really nothing else I could do at this point other than to like strap myself to the chair that I'm sitting in. And
what you almost did anyways.
Well, no, I did in Cresson. I handcuffed myself.
Right. I know. But it wasn't like that. It was, you were kind of arms out, but
funny story about.
I just want to let you know that when I saw you doing that, all I could think was, bro, what the fuck is going like that? You can elevate the medium by screaming at the ghosts, or you can elevate it by strapping your ass to a fucking chair in one of these places. Like that's way more intense than screaming at ghosts. So I have to give you the utmost props for that, because I wouldn't do that. I'm not going to go strap myself to a chair and then put on the noise canceling headphones and then put my beanie down so I can't see anything. Like, I'm good. Like, I don't need to find out that badly, but you do, clearly.
I did. And I wanted to put myself in the most vulnerable position possible to see if that would have any sort of effect on the Estes method. Like, it's one thing to sit there blindfolded with some headphones on and you can't see or hear what's going on around you. But then if something happens and I have no choice but to sit there and endure it, I feel like the ghosts are like, all right, this guy's all right. You know what I mean? Like, he can hang. Like, we're going to scare the shit out of him.
You're opening yourself up to it.
Yeah. I'm just being more available for them to either communicate through me or do whatever they decide that they're going to do.
So I have an interesting question, and this is kind of melding two things that I've been thinking about recently. Has anyone ever done anything to the effect of taking a sensory deprivation tank into one of these haunted places and putting themselves in one of those sensory deprivation tanks in like SCI Cresson or Forest Haven? Has anyone ever done that?
As far as I know, no. I mean, maybe somebody has done it on TV or on.
I've never heard of it. Have you?
No, I haven't. I would love to do that.
But you're 3/4 of the way there with the Estes method. You're blanking out your eyes. You're essentially blanking out your hearing, but your physical, I mean, I guess you're strapping yourself to the chair and handcuffing yourself. So you're essentially saying, I can't move.
Right.
But I wonder what you would get out of that, what that would be like.
Like a salt tub, like an actual
Yeah, like a sense, like they like in altered states, like they put you in there and they close the door. I mean, I could go. It's $50 for an hour here to go do it, but it's a well lit place. It's a private room. You strip down, you shower in the room, and then you get into the tank. Like I'm talking about doing that like at Forest Haven. What does that do? See. I don't know about that. I got to cut this out of the show now because I'm dead serious. Like I genuinely wonder what would happen because I don't know if anyone has done it. But that is exactly what the Estes method is. Just one step further. One step further, right? I mean, realistically, because you could be doing the Estes method while you were in there with a camera watching you. But if you have completely deprived yourself and then you start feeling things, oh my God.
Is there a way to build one? Like, could you build one on a budget, or would you have to get like some $10,000 tank and have it hauled in there?
I think you could probably build one in place. I would know why you wouldn't be able to. I mean, it's a tub with a water salinity content that allows you to float, and then everything else is up to you. I mean, getting the noise canceling headphones, getting the blackout goggles or whatever, like that's all on you when you're in there, but you just have to build a square container that you sit in that has a salinity high enough for you to float.
Just get an above ground pool. I don't know why I didn't think about that.
And then just build something over the top of it.
Yeah, like a blackout curtain or like cloth or something.
Or you could take one of those pools and fill it halfway, and then you could just put like a tarp over the top.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud because the sensory deprivation aspect of the Estes method is the thing that your video really tripped in me, because when they did it in Hellier, the only other time I'd seen it, they're sitting out on like a porch of a cabin, and he's sitting there like this with the glasses and the earphones on, saying, you know, doing the same thing you were doing where it's calling out what he's hearing. Mm-hmm. But like you mentioned, you put yourself in that position. You put yourself in a compromised or more vulnerable position that may incur some sort of response from the spirits that you might not get otherwise, because they're not perceiving you as being that accommodating or willing or wanting to feel it. I don't know. Like that's the most locking yourself to a chair is one thing, but floating in a tank full of water.
Floating in a tank full of water and being handcuffed at the same time.
I like that. Oh man, you really just want to handcuff yourself. Oh yeah,
go all in.
Yeah. I wonder if anyone has done that, because again, like it further begs the question of what is triggering these experiences. You know, because
we should have had this conversation back in June when it was warm enough. I could have went and tried that theory out for you. It's too cold now.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you're doing it anywhere anywhere other than like the deep south, maybe like you can't get away with it anymore. You'll be frozen in the tank. You won't be frozen because it's high salinity. It'll just be miserable.
Yeah.
It'll just be completely miserable. You'll be fucking cold, but you won't freeze at least.
I'll be more concerned about the actual temperature than giving any responses, just shaking in the tub the whole time.
So I guess, you know, speaking about EVPs and Estes method, for you, if someone were to ask you, what is for you the most convincing piece of evidence that someone could bring to you for the paranormal, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one, because there's so many types of evidence that you could get.
Right. I'm talking about for you specifically, though, like you personally, like what's the thing that gets Mike of Charm City Paranormal? Like what's your holy grail that you want to find?
I really like seeing devices in conjunction with EVPs all tie in to the current event happening, like at the investigation. If somebody is asking questions, say for example, yes, no questions, and like we use a REM pod, green light means yes, blue light means no. If all of those colors are lighting up exactly to what you're asking, and you're getting EVPs on top of that on the microphone that is essentially answering your questions, and you don't even know that until you go home and review the footage, to me, I think that makes for far more compelling evidence than seeing something on the screen. Because, I mean, it's one thing if you actually capture like an entity or a spirit or something on camera. I mean, that's very substantial evidence by all means. But to be able to sit down and have conversation with something that apparently doesn't exist, and you can't see it, but you can hear it, and there's no altercation or altering of the footage. That the person that is creating the content or filming it is genuine, having that conversation with an entity that you can't see or isn't technically there after society has spent all this time saying that the stuff isn't real, that to me is very substantial.
I agree. I think it shows a level of consciousness that just seeing something doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you see something. I mean, I believe that, we talked about like energies being trapped and kind of how does energy dissipate. I feel like the full body apparitions are just energy replaying itself.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't serve a consciousness. That doesn't have a consciousness tied to it. That's just, somebody just scrubbing through the tape and, oh, there goes the thing, flying on by. But like, it doesn't serve to interact with you directly unless it does, but those are full body apparitions are few and far between. And then people interacting with them, like that evidence essentially doesn't exist in a substantive way.
No, it doesn't. And I think
because if it did, it would be like the thing, like it would be the thing.
Yeah, they would be the one to have essentially answered the question that people have been chasing for decades. Like, are ghosts real? Is there an afterlife? Well, there's your proof right there. Nobody would be doing this anymore because we'd have proof. But even still, I think that being able to figure out why something is there and have a conversation with it and understand its purpose for being in this place or this area, this building, whatever. To me, that I just find that a lot more fascinating than going like, oh, look, there's a ghost, or oh, there's an orb, or whatever. Like, I want to know why it's there. I want to know its purpose for being there. Is it stuck? Does it choose to stay there? Is there a story behind it? What is the story? Our whole existence is based off of storytelling and sharing tales with each other and continuing the story of ancestors and ourselves. So I want to know whatever that energy story is, and I want to try to continue it in an honest and authentic way. And if I see somebody else doing that, I just get far more excited than seeing a ghost.
And that for me is, I think you've answered the question in my mind of what is your angle. And I think it's a much more humanistic angle to doing all of this, which I think is the natural progression of the medium in a lot of ways. I mean, we had at least with this kind of like video paranormal investigative stuff, we originally had taps, which I felt was very like procedural, workmanlike in a way. Like those guys were very matter of fact, but that's what worked. They were all just like blue collar dudes going out and looking for ghosts. And then that transitions into the more bombast, right? With somebody like Zach Bagans or a lot of these other shows that exist. But then it comes to something like what you're creating, which is, I think, a much more humanistic, holistic look at the experience and what does it mean? Not let's just try to get the ghost to punch me in the face or to hit me in the head with my backpack. Like there is no future benefit to interacting with ghosts in that way because you don't get anything out of it. But the way you're doing it, if you can actually garner a sentient, coherent, well thought out response from the ghost, that matters a lot more than seeing a full body apparition, right?
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, I'm just trying to more or less continue the story of wherever that energy or that spirit was left off and try to do my best to interpret it in the way that I see it, the way that the message was, I guess, delivered to me at that time, and just keep the story going. Everybody has this purpose of like, I want to prove life after death, or I want to prove that ghosts are real. And that's fine. I respect it. We all have our reasons for doing this. But for me, it's not so much about proving anything or proving that this stuff is real, but just really just sharing my experience with it and how I interpret it, how I see it, and hoping that it's delivered in an earnest and sincere way that will convince you that it is real and that, what we're doing is genuine. And if it doesn't, then, either way, like, it's just water under the bridge. I don't know. Everybody's like, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to be the one to prove that it's real. It's like, you're not, man. I'm sorry. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, get your hopes up, but you're not going to prove it.
Well, it's pretty, I mean, wouldn't you say that that's like finding Bigfoot? I mean, it's, for me, Bigfoot is like my big thing. Like It's the likelihood that you or I would be the ones to find Bigfoot are pretty low, like maybe a little higher because we're putting ourselves in those positions. Like I guess question for you, do you think should proof, quote unquote, of the paranormal ever come to be at least proof that we could all agree on, a substantial majority of us can agree on? Do you think it'll come from someone who actively goes after it? Or do you think it'll come from someone who, you know, Bob down the street is in his house and he walks into his kitchen and holy shit, there's a ghost standing in his kitchen.
Just making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
But you know what I mean? Like, is it going to be that mundane? Because there's always this argument in all of these, you know, paranormal, supernatural kind of lanes of thinking that are like the people that are looking for it are going to be the ones to prove it. You don't go, why are people surprised when someone goes looking for Bigfoot that they find him? Why is that a problem?
I don't know. That right? Always like you bugged me.
You went to Forest Haven and you saw stuff. If you went to the Starbucks down the street and didn't see anything, yeah, like that's not haunted. Like, but I go to Forest Haven and I see things. Like, why is that a problem?
I honestly, I couldn't answer that. There's really no way for me to answer that because I don't know. I don't understand why people are like. It's like you said earlier, like, oh, this is fake, but then something happens that changes your mind. And it's like, this is what I've been trying to tell you since the beginning. Like, if you're going to go here, if you're going to go to a haunted place and look for ghosts, don't be surprised if you find them. Like, that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do.
You didn't choose to go to a sanatorium in the middle of nowhere by accident. You don't end up in Forest Haven by accident. You don't end up in the Sally house by accident. You don't just wander in there off the street. Oh, what am I doing here? Like, that's not how this works anymore, even. That's how it used to work back, 50, 60, 70 years ago, or even before then. But now it's like, that's not how this works. You're there intentionally.
Yeah, you have a purpose for what you're doing. So if you find answers to the questions you have, why are you surprised? Like, why even a little bit? It's like, I was not expecting ghosts to be here or get anything tonight. Really? Because you're in a haunted house right now. And that's usually how this works.
And the public's response to people like yourself who go out and do this is like, well, they're paranormal investigators. They're trying to find stuff. It's like, yeah. It's weird. It's weird to me, that kind of line of thinking. I mean, I think we're at a point now in society where nothing is going to satisfy anybody anymore in regards to proving or disproving, which I think, like you mentioned with, people who are like, I'm going to prove that ghosts are real. Like, do you really want to try to tackle that? Like, good luck.
Yeah,
like,
you're going to stress yourself out way too much.
Yeah. Like, why don't you go write the next great American novel? You might have a better time doing that even. Like, at least you'll get some words on the page. Going out with the sole purpose of trying to prove Bigfoot exists or ghosts exist feels like a fool's errand, because there's more, like you've said, more interesting questions to answer, more exciting things that could be garnered from it rather than does this exist or not.
And I think for the people that are going out and looking for those experiences, I think a lot of it has to do with, at least for me, it really became more so validating my personal experiences with it all versus like trying to prove it to the rest of the world. Like I creating content happened by accident. All of this stuff really, truly happened by accident. Like, I didn't sit down and I was like, I'm going to make content. I'm going to buy these cameras. I'm going to upload once a week. All this, like, all of it just kind of naturally progressed into what it is today. And it really, at the root of it all, was just me wanting to prove to myself what I had experienced in Forest Haven. I wanted to validate those experiences. And I just so happened to fall in love with all the other stuff that comes with it. But I think people shouldn't be so focused on trying to prove it to the rest of the world so much as they are trying to prove it to themselves and be able at the very end of the day to say, you know what, despite what anybody says to me or what the majority of people believe or don't believe, I know what I experienced. I know that it was real for me, and that should be good enough. Otherwise, you're just going to stress yourself out trying to prove it to everybody else.
Right. Well, and that's why I often say, like, I don't believe the person. I say, I believe that you believe you had an experience, which I think is more important anymore to say anybody to anymore anyways, because I don't want to invalidate anyone's experiences. And again, it's a lot of these things are deeply personal. A lot of these things have meaning to the people that have had them, or they ascribe meaning to them. I saw grandma as a cardinal flying by the window, stuff like that. I mean, that's, ascribe meaning to that, what you will, but like that gives a semblance of comfort to some people, right? And I would never want to diminish their experiences, whatever they are, just like nobody would hopefully want to diminish mine. So yeah, like you said, to your point, I think at this point in a post-truth society, I think trying to prove that ghosts exist is kind of beyond the point anymore. Like, you couldn't, even if you tried. Like,
no, absolutely.
Even if you had a ghost in a jar on the table, you would not convince people.
And it's in the jar like, hey, I'm a ghost. They'd be like, that's CG. That's fake.
Yeah, that's fake.
All right, everybody, I'm setting up tours around the country so you can all meet the ghost in the jar. And they'd be like, nah, you're doing something. There's some kind of effect or light or something. Like they would still not believe it.
Paranormal investigators get the magician run around a little bit. They kind of, you fall into the same kind of defensatory camp for your job in a lot of ways. It's like, no, I'm not lying. No, I'm not doing this. Like I'm trying to see, there's nothing under the table. Why don't you believe me?
Yeah, I've learned to just kind of let that go. If people believe me, cool. If you don't believe me, cool.
You're never going to convince them anyways.
Yeah, like I just don't care anymore. I cared for a little bit in the beginning. Like there'd be a couple people that'd be like, oh, you're probably exaggerating or faking it. I'd be like, no, I'm not. This is so real. But now I'm just like, okay, either you believe me or you don't. I'm not losing sleep over it.
And they're never going to go out into any one of these places and fucking handcuff themselves to a seat. So I believe this stuff and I'm not going to do it. Like, take it from me, folks. I don't want to do what Mike does. Jesus. I mean, I would do it once, but I wouldn't go and do it over and over again.
I got to handcuff you in the Sally house.
I would do it in a heartbeat. That the basement of that place is scary stuff, man.
On the demon stain or whatever.
Oh yeah. I've seen it. You're not supposed to go down into the basement, but I was like, am I gonna really walk like I walked there? I walked 300 miles to the Sally house. Am I really gonna go visit the Sally house and not go into the basement? Like, even if they tell me not to?
No.
Right? Like, I don't know. I'm supposed to say, you're supposed to say no. But like the again, like it's the whole reason you visit these places to begin with. It's that inherent curious nature of human beings that don't, at least the curious of us that don't want to just say, well, this is it. This is all I can see is all there is. And I don't like that clearly any more than you do. So
yeah, I can't, I'm really bad about taking people's word for it as far as this stuff goes. Like if somebody told me this place is crazy haunted and all this stuff happened, well, for one, I want to experience it myself. But for two, it's like I have to go and see that for myself to a level of degree to like be like, okay, yes, you're right. This place is crazy. I should have just taken your word for it. But I'm too hard-headed when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's hard for me to watch somebody else do it in a video or a movie or whatever and go, yep, that's exactly how it went. That's how it happened.
Because you want to be there.
Yeah, I want to be there. I want to see if they're either full of it or telling the truth to some extent.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. Like I've always like this, what you do, it looks for the minor amount that I've done, it's a trip. It really is. Like there's nothing else like it. There's really nothing else like it. Going into a place that you know is haunted and just hunkering down. Like it's you can't explain it to someone unless you do it.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe it, and no amount of editing or filming or evidence that you get on camera really does it justice in the way that going and experiencing it in person does. Like I could capture the craziest shit you've ever seen in your life, and it's still, I don't think it would be enough. Like unless you went there and experienced it for yourself. Yeah, the video might be entertaining or you might believe it, but just go do it. Yeah. I encourage anybody that watches any of these types of videos or TV shows, if you have a smidge of doubt about it, just go do it. Go try it for yourself, and then you can be the one to determine if this stuff is real or not. Yeah,
I 100% agree. That's, for me, it's like, if you don't believe it, like go do it once. And then like, if you still don't believe it, great. But like, it's hard to capture a sense of dread or stuffiness in a space due to whatever you don't know what it is. Like it's hard to describe that through video, and even harder through audio or any other visual audio medium. I mean, it's a in the moment, you have to be there type thing. So what you do, like I said, I feel like you do a very good job of capturing it in your videos, which,
thank you.
Yeah. Well, and again, like that's the thing about what I really appreciate about your content is just, it is stripped down to exactly what you would want. You know what I mean? Like it's none of the bullshit, none of the people screaming and yelling. It's like, we're doing this. We're going to be very upfront about it. We're going to be very honest about it. We'll give you some history, which I do appreciate because not enough shows or people care enough about it. But again, like you said, the idea of really approaching it humanistically, I think, is the future of this medium in a big way. Because again, telling the stories should be the most important story. It's telling everybody else's story is your job. And so I appreciate that. So what is next for Charm City Paranormal? What do you guys have in the pipeline, in the can? Sally House. Not anytime soon. Yeah, no, God, the weather here is just gonna get. I mean, you're in a cold climb as well, so you're gonna get snow. You just want to be trapped where you live with snow, not trapped in the Sally House with snow.
Yeah, we're really good about salting the roads. So like it'll snow and they'll dump 4 pounds of salt on every square inch of the road. So we're good on that.
Kansas probably is too. Nebraska, not so much.
Yeah, you guys are in the dead center of it, man.
Yeah,
as far as like snow and cold weather. For us, I don't know. We want to do Sally House. I was talking with Ken DaCosta about possibly going out to the Conjuring House in November. I haven't been there yet. I really, really want to go there just to again see it for myself, because there's so much that surrounds that house, and I want to see if it's exaggerated or if it's really as crazy as people claim it to be, and just report on it as unbiased as I possibly can. We also have, I think I have 12 full investigations on a hard drive that I still have to edit that I haven't gotten around to.
Such is the life of the content creator.
Yeah. I guess some videos that people can expect in the near future. I won't say all of them, but I'll say a few of them. So Cresson Part 2 is definitely in the works. Ohio State Reformatory.
It's a big one.
That's a big one.
Mansfield, right?
Yeah. Mansfield. Moundsville Penitentiary is another one that we did recently, I think back in June or July. And right now I'm working on the haunted theater that I do tours at. I did an investigation there 2 weekends ago. And I just finished writing the script today for the history and the intro and the talking points. So there's a lot. There's a lot in the works. At least another good solid year of just always catching up with edits. I'm not doing any more investigations for the rest of the year, maybe one more, but I'm not doing any weekly or bi-weekly investigations until I can get at least 3 of these videos done. I just want to get 3 or 4, and then I'll feel better about going out, because I keep going out and I'm like, fuck, man, I have 9 videos sitting at home that I haven't even started on yet. I haven't even synced the files together, and here I am filming more.
So I have to ask, as from one content creator to another, what is your length of time that you spend on each one of these videos? For every minute of recording, it's how many minutes of editing you think?
On average, I would say 50 to 80 hours per video. That's for a 30 to 45 minute video. If it's any longer than that, the longest I've ever spent on a video was about 125 hours, and that was to make Forest Haven.
Right.
But on average, I'd say about 50 to 80 hours of work. Yeah, that's a lot. People think I could just content farm and dump once a week, and it's I can't, guys. Way. If you guys want it to stay, if you want the level of engagement and quality to stay consistent throughout the channel, you're going to get about 2 videos a month tops, and that's the best I can do, because I'm not going to sacrifice the quality for quantity. I'll never do that.
Which I think is important, because there is plenty of other noise on the line in the space of people doing plenty of other things. And like I said, you came very highly recommended by Josh Bragg, and I'm kind of disappointed I never saw your stuff on my own on YouTube, because again, your content is the exact kind of stuff that I like watching. So I'm glad Josh sent you my way, but more of the stuff that YouTube promotes, I think we both know what it is.
Yeah, we don't have to say much.
Yeah, yucking it up about ghosts, which is fine. But I don't get the sense that you're trespassing onto people's properties, not asking permission. I don't get the sense you're doing any of that, which again comes across in your content. So
we always try to get permission, or we pay to rent the location overnight. There's a ton that goes into making those ghost hunts happen. It's not just I'm going to roll up to the spot and start filming. No, that's how you get trespassing charges or shot at.
Yeah, worse. I would say in some of those places in the middle of nowhere, God knows what lays on the other end of people who trespass. So yeah, man, that's wild. Now I feel better about how much content I make and how yeah, man, that's wild. That's a lot.
Yeah, it takes a very long time, and it's mostly my fault. I could get them done sooner. I could cut a few corners in certain places that probably don't need that much attention, just to get the videos out a little bit faster. But I don't know, man. I'm just so picky about the way that I present these videos and how I create. I don't know. I feel like I found my formula, and people will notice right away when I compromise in any area of what I do.
Right.
So now that expectation has been set, I can't deviate from that. Like, it was okay when I, had 1,000 subs or, even 2,000 subs. If I wanted to put out like kind of I don't want to call it like a half-baked video, but we'll just call it that, a half-baked video, people would still watch it. They'd be like, this was cool. But now that there's almost 60,000 people watching, somebody's going to call it and be like, yo, what the fuck? Your video is, this one is lazy. Like, there's no history or like the color grade. So somebody's going to find something to pick at. So I try to avoid that as much as possible, and I button up as much as I can, which I still make mistakes. I made a mistake in the last video that I'm waiting for somebody to call it. It's going to happen. They're going to see it and be like, dude, what is this? What is this shit? And I'll be like, oh, I didn't think anybody would notice.
The only person who notices is me. Oh no, not anymore. So I hear you.
As a fellow editor, I noticed that. It's like, oh, here we go.
Oh my God. Boy.
Here we go.
Well, and that's the thing, as an audio editor, I don't have a lot of video background experience because, again, that's like another mountain of its own to climb.
Yeah.
But I try not to do that with other people's audio stuff where it's like, I hear the mistakes. Like, yeah. Cause like you said, like if anyone's watching it, that's an editor. They're like, I noticed that. It's like, oh, fuck you. Like, come on.
It's like watching a movie with a film student or like a director or producer or something. They can't watch the movie just to watch it. They're just like, there's no continuity. This is here. That's there. Oh, that color grading is terrible. And it's like, will you please watch the movie?
Yeah. I have a movie podcast that I've been doing for 8 years, so I know what you're getting at. I know the kind of people you're talking about. I might be one of them.
Oh,
probably.
No.
Probably. Not like that. That's just like menial bullshit. That's like industry, like how they make the movie. Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, with the amount of content and the amount of access and the amount of people you can, have access to on YouTube, I think you're right. Like making sure your content is perfect is not a bad thing, especially when it's as long and kind of in depth as the content that you make is. So like you said, you have to nail it every time. So darn you for doing a good job, I guess. Sorry, man.
Yeah, that's what I get for being consistent.
How dare you do a good job, right? Now they expect it from me every time.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I can't slack ever.
Yeah. So if my audience wanted to find your videos, the content that you so clearly lovingly make, where would they go to find it?
You can find everything on YouTube. I also post photography and sort of like behind the scenes reels and things like that on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon. I post all my videos to Patreon ad-free and a day early. So if people want to see them right away, they're on there. Pretty much everywhere. I'm on everything.
Don't you love it?
Yeah, I'm on everything. I post my videos on several platforms, several social medias. But yeah, as far as the videos go, YouTube.
Charm City Paranormal on YouTube. It will only yield one search result, which is your videos. So it's good.
I'm very proud of that, by the way.
I would be, because I'm surprised nobody took that name.
There was a Charm City Paranormal Society in like 2014, 2015, but I don't think they're active anymore. I think they briefly came back in like 2020, and then they disappeared again. There's the Charm City Ghostbusters, which are the guys, I think there's like a whole country collective of different states or different major cities that are like this city Ghostbusters. So
you're talking like they have like an Ecto 1 and everything, right?
Yeah, they have the vehicle, the outfits, everything, and they I guess role play hardcore as Ghostbusters. But we have a Charm City Ghostbusters. But that's it. I'm the only Charm City Paranormal.
Hey, which is that's the good only one to be, especially for the lovely city of Baltimore. So Baltimore, right? Charm City, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No.
I'm just making sure. Like I'm just making sure here. Okay. Yeah, because it was like Charm City's Baltimore, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, that would have been a really fucking concern.
No, man, I'm in Minneapolis.
Yeah, bro. Sorry. Oh, man. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining me. This has been great.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, no, like I said, I mean, definitely, I would love to have you back to talk more in depth about your videos. But yeah, man, I just seeing you handcuffed to that chair, man. It's like, all bets are off. It's that for me was the moment I realized like this is the kind of content that just like I want more people to see this, because this is the future of this kind of stuff, not screaming at ghosts down a well or God knows what Zach Bagans is up to right now.
I hope so. I really
getting more things for his haunted museum in Las Vegas.
I spent $150,000 for a lunchbox from a serial killer.
Hey man, I've been to that museum. I have a friend that used to work at that museum.
Really?
I had a friend that yeah, it's a whole thing. So I'm just gonna cut the recording here because I can do the outro.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.